It is normal to want to protect ourselves, but we have to be able to discern between real danger, like an imminent attack, right? Actual danger, physical danger, and what our ego perceives as danger. When someone approaches you, they want to tell you they have a problem with something that you did, they want to talk. Do you find yourself becoming defensive? Do you want to defend why you did the thing you did? Do you want to build a case for the way that you did it? If you're nodding your head, first of all, this video is for you. Secondly, you are so not alone. It is so human to want to defend what we've done, but it's also super damaging to our relationships. So in this video, I'm going to be walking you through a bunch of symptoms so you can recognize if you are being very defensive. And then I'm going to walk you through the reasons why we want to change it and then things that you can do to change it. So we're going to start with one of my favorite quotes about defensiveness from one of my favorite therapists. Her name is Dr. Harriet Lerner, and she says, defensiveness is the arch enemy of connection and intimacy. She also says, defensiveness is the arch enemy of listening, which it is. I love both of those quotes. So what does it mean to be defensive? Let's just break it down a little bit before we get into symptoms and understanding and problem solving. So according to online dictionary, the quality of being anxious to challenge or to avoid criticism. So this is what we're doing, right? And then the second explanation is behavior intended to defend or protect. So the first says their supporters have reacted with defensiveness and hostility to the disclosure, right? Just fake sentence. And then the behavior intended to defend or protect, defensiveness of the hive was related to the size of the colony, right? So we look at it differently, but as human beings, when we're being defensive, we're also intending to defend and protect ourselves, our ego. We don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to get into a conflict with others. We don't want to be rejected. Like there's so many reasons why. And when you're automatically defensive, it's like a reaction because we're afraid of criticism. We're afraid for someone to tell us that we're doing something wrong. Many of us, I certainly was in my younger years, for sure. I've worked really hard on not being defensive because I've seen the damage that it does to relationships, and I don't want it doing that damage to my relationships, you know? So my favorite definition or like term defensiveness comes from a woman named Sharon Ellison. She says, to be defensive is to react with a war mentality to a non-war issue. So I'm going to say that again. To be defensive is to react with a war mentality to a non-war issue. So it is the tendency to be really sensitive to comments and criticism, to deny and refute them. When we feel threatened, our fight, flight, freeze, fawn response gets activated, flooding our system with adrenaline. So this is not just a psychological or emotional experience that we're having. We are having a physiological experience when we are becoming defensive. So now we've got all this adrenaline going around. First of all, we have to just normalize the experience because it is normal to want to protect ourselves, right? But we have to be able to discern between real danger, like an imminent attack, right? Actual danger, physical danger, and what our ego perceives as danger, like being wrong or fearing embarrassment, looking foolish. You don't want to make a mistake in front of people. We can feel similarly physically activated and threatened in both of those situations. But if it's not an imminent attack, we are responding, as Sharon says, with a war mentality, like life or death, to a non-war situation, right? Which is what we want to change. All right, so what are the symptoms of being defensive? So you're going to check, and I'm going to put this in the guide, terricole.com/guide. So you're going to be able to check the boxes and see but how defensive you are, right? It depends on how many boxes you check, which will indicate. So let's see. You silently go over a list of reasons why the negative feedback you've gotten isn't true. You start quickly listing a series of points to justify your behavior. I definitely used to do this. When I was an assistant at a talent agency many years ago, I mean, decades at this point, I didn't understand about defensiveness. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I'd had a little bit of therapy, but I really wasn't self-reflective. I wasn't old enough. I hadn't lived long enough to be. And I was very defensive, where I didn't know it was defensiveness though. I thought I was just explaining to my boss why I was doing something the way that I was, but it was defensiveness. And he just, in my face, was like, Terri, I'm not interested in why you did the thing I didn't want you to do. I'm telling you the way I want you to do it, and I really don't appreciate your defensiveness. And I was like, oh my God, my boss, A, just bawled me out. I'm going to cry. B, he's so right. But I learned so much from that job and from that guy. Hi, Scott Sedita. He's out in LA teaching, acting. That was you, Scott. Shout out to you, my friend. But he was honest, and he helped me be better, and in one way was being less defensive and recognizing how often in my life I was being defensive because I honestly sincerely didn't know. These are symptoms of defensiveness. You stop listening to what the other person is saying. You start blaming other people, right? You didn't give me enough time, or blaming someone else, like Jenny didn't do her part, type of a thing. Again, we're trying to we're defending ourselves, defending our position. You start feeling anxious the moment someone starts to give you feedback. Like you almost feel it coming and you're like, you reply to most criticism with but, and then you want to fill in the blank of what excuse or what reason you gave. Or you respond by throwing someone else under the bus. Like Bob didn't do it his that way either, right? Again, defensiveness. You might become sarcastic to deflect that feedback, like you can almost make a joke or be like, oh, okay, queen, or whatever. You use closed body language, like crossing your arms or like towards the person, like your body is saying, get lost. So don't worry. If you recognize yourself in any of those, working on being less defensive is what we're doing in this episode. So here you're in the exact right place. So to establish the truth that when we are reacting defensively, we are feeling threatened. When we feel threatened, as we said before, fight, flight, freeze, fawn gets activated. So we want to be aware of and be able to sort of self-regulate that it's not necessary, right? Like there is, as my friend Lara Riggio would say, my energy worker bestie, there's no lions and tigers and bears about to jump on me or eat me. Like we are not in that type of danger. And yet it can feel so much like we are. So one way to stop being defensive, let's just move into some of the strategies that you can use to shift this in your own life if you feel that you're defensive in your relationships, is to take an inventory, right? Raise your awareness about how often and with whom do you react most defensively. I find that I usually don't act it out now at this stage of my life, but I can feel more defensive with people who I think are judgmental. So with other folks, if they ask me a question, I don't assume they're judging me. Or if they question why I did what I did, I don't assume a negative feeling. But with people who I've known to be judgmental in the past, I have a tendency to want to defend myself more because I feel more threatened by those people because I feel judged by those people. When we think about what is harmful about being defensive in a relationship, when you're regularly defensive, people stop wanting to share their truth about you with you, right? They just are like, ugh. It inspires other people to walk on eggshells around you, which does not invite deep conversations. It doesn't invite deep connections. So there really is a high cost of being defensive, and it can make you be lonely or feel lonely, even in your relationships. So how do we stop? Like, what is it that we do? Well, you got to want to stop. That's with anything, right? We raise our awareness, but there has to be a desire to do it better, to do it differently. So move from reacting, right? Because now you're going to be proactive and think about your defensiveness rather than just letting yourself go with it. And we're going to move from reacting to being consciously curious, like asking questions. And you can ask questions of the other person, right? Okay, so tell me how that happened, or what made you feel that way, or what did I say that, inspired that reaction from you? And then you can respond. But it's like you don't have to immediately shut down or go into fight or flight. And if you do that, you can't have conversations. We have to be proactive enough with thinking about curbing these defensive reactions so that when they're in the moment, you can stay calm and be willing to really listen to what the other person has to say. I mean, I've gone from in my 20s being defensive and called out by my boss and embarrassed to being someone who I love honest feedback. I trust that if you guys are giving me feedback about something, you're not doing it to be mean. We have such a beautiful community that I trust. If you're telling me something's bothering you, or whatever it is, I have faith. Like I see it coming from a loving place. And listen, obviously there's trolls on the internet. That doesn't mean every single person, but mostly I'm happy to get the feedback, especially if it has to do with courses or anything. I always give an anonymous survey at the end of my courses because I know that people like me a lot. And so when the surveys were not anonymous, people were really reticent to give any critical feedback, which is what I need to make the courses better, right? So once we made it anonymous, then people felt safe that I wouldn't know who they were. I wouldn't take it personally. I don't take it personally, but it personally inspires me and makes me feel so grateful when people take the time to give me their feedback. And I know it's easier for people not to, right? So part of it is really switching your own frame, pivoting towards seeing feedback from people you respect. I'm not talking about everyone on the internet. I mean, from people you care about. Like being someone that people can talk to, that people can say, I'd really prefer you not do X, Y, and Z, because this is what improves your relationships with others and with yourself, right? You need to understand why you are the way you are before you can change it, right? We have to get that. You have to want to change. You need to seek to understand, like why is there a defensiveness? And all of us have a defensiveness blueprint, especially if you're pretty defensive, right? By looking at the way the adults in your life acted, reacted, responded. Were they defensive? Were they hypercritical of you? Were you really punished if you made mistakes, or were you shamed regularly, right? You might naturally feel self-protective and become defensive when someone expresses anger, frustration, or disappointment with you if you had a childhood where those were your experiences. So maybe some of those experiences need your attention. Maybe you should journal about them. But you have to remember, now is not then. So we don't want to be projecting these unresolved or these activated childhood injuries onto the people in our life because they're not them. So I'll give you a couple of questions in the guide, terricole.com/guide, so that you can get a little handle on your blueprint from childhood. And what are some other things that you can do? You got to raise your self-esteem, right? The more secure you feel in yourself, right, the less defensive you are, because the less afraid you are to make mistakes. Like the more you accomplish, the more solid you feel in yourself. And boundaries have everything to do with that. Having boundaries in your life, and also not letting people you don't care about, whose opinion you don't value, give you critical feedback. Like, who the hell asked you? That is really important, because I think it's way easier to take critical feedback from people whose opinion you respect, someone that you care about, someone who you believe truly cares about you. It makes it so much easier to hear it because it's from a loving source. You also have to understand your triggers, right? If you find yourself being defensive with someone in particular, you might be having a transference to that person, right? Reacting in the current situation fueled by unresolved feelings, like I was just talking about from the past situation, but a situation that is similar. Someone might remind you of your critical or punitive father. And so you might be more reactive and more defensive with them. So this is where you can use the 3 cues for clarity, which I will include in the guide, which is asking yourself, who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And how or why am I interacting? The behavioral dynamic, how is that familiar to me? And I think that you will really get some clarity around that. Another thing you can do is practice mindfulness, right? Do a daily meditation, 10 minutes in the morning or 10 minutes in the afternoon. Let them do guided meditations. Go to Insight Timer. I have like 45 tracks on there. It's free, right? I mean, or you can pay like $70 for the year. It's amazing. So good, you know? But do that, because what does mindfulness do for us? What does meditation do? It creates space between the thought and the action. And so much of the time, that's all we need is like a 2-second break. Where we're like, oh, okay, so I don't have to be defensive. Maybe I could listen with this person. Maybe I could listen. So the last thing I want to say about this is we want to reframe this, right? Negative feedback or critical feedback from someone. The reason I love it is that it's a growth opportunity, and I will take that anywhere I can get it. So if the person is not personally attacking you, right, and we have to be discerning about who's doing what and why, then I really want you to try to reframe it as a growth opportunity, because it really is what it is. All right, I said that was it, but one more thing. Listen to learn, right? We want to listen with an open mind to the people whose opinions we value. So again, that is a big caveat, but it's important, because I don't let every person in my life give me their critical feedback. If I'm not seeking input from you, if you say I have something to tell you and it's someone I have zero respect for, I'm not necessarily open to hearing that. Not because I'm defensive, because I'm discerning. Because if I don't respect you, I don't care what you think, Anyway, life is too short. I got too much going on. You can't worry about what everyone thinks. But for the people whose opinion you do respect, or the people who love you and you trust how they feel about you, really try to listen with the intent of learning when they're giving you critical feedback. All right, you guys, I hope that this episode of the Terri Cole Show added value to your life, maybe gave you an aha moment. I hope that it lessened your suffering. I hope that it increased your joy. And I hope you have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.